blackout. Izuku knew that something was wrong as soon as the power went out. He waited for the backup generators to kick in, but when nothing happened, he immediately kicked into action. He tried to check the cameras, but without the power from the grid or the generators, they were still offline. They would have still had visualization of the students from the little spider bots that May had created. If his computer hadn't been affected by the blackout. This was bad. This was very, very bad. May. Izuku asked. What would cause a critical failure like this? Sabotage. May answered grimly. Someone would have had to destroy or disable every single backup generator and the backups to the backups before cutting the power to get it to go out like this. So this is an attack. Izuku took a deep breath. How soon can we have power back online? Give me 5 minutes. May was already grabbing her tools, maybe 10 if I run into trouble. Izuku nodded. I need to track down my laptop. I'll try to find some of the students and have them guard you. Our highest priorities are to get power back online and probably find Uraraka, since she'll make communication easier. His phone buzzed in his pocket and he frowned as he looked at who the message was from. Why is Kaminari of all people texting me? There was an image attached and Izuku clicked on it hesitantly, expecting a meme, not a photo of Hitoshi tangled in Minetta's purple balls in one of the back halls of Ua. His mouth went dry. Never mind. Izuku swallowed. Priorities changed. And then they heard something crash. Mina hurried down the hall, looking for any one of her classmates. She'd gotten separated from her partner by some of the 1B students with creepy quirks and hadn't been too concerned about it, but then the lights went out, so it was just her, acid skating down the hall in almost pitch-black darkness. She heard a large crash and pushed herself even faster. She saw an odd shape moving away from her through the darkness and called out, "Hey! Wait up!" The shape started going faster and Mina huffed in frustration, "Hey! I said, wait up, don't run away from me." She skated after them as fast as she could go and rammed into them within seconds, sending the shape sprawling to the floor. "Hey! What's the big idea?" Minetta's shrill voice echoed through the hall and Mina groaned. Of course it had to be Minetta. She looked around the hall and froze when she saw Shinso, unconscious and completely stuck in a net of purple balls. You weren't partnered with Shinso for the exercise. There was just enough light for her to see Minetta roll his eyes. Yeah, no shit. Now just run away and maybe I'll let you live. What are you talking about? Mina scrambled to her feet. What are you doing with Shinso? None of your business, bitch. Minetta growled. No? Mina coated her hands with acid. You're trying to hurt one of my friends so, duh, yeah, it's my business. She skated by and tried to grab Shinso, only to get tripped up by a barrage of sticky balls landing right in her path. She managed to catch her footing again and turned back toward Minetta, dropping into a fighting stance, only to freeze as she realized the balls were dissolving as soon as they came in contact with her acid. Wait, that looks familiar. Mina's jaw dropped. I saw pictures of that on the news. You're Trapper, you're a villain. Nice of you to finally catch on. Minetta said dryly. Now get out of my way. Todoroki looked around the room when the lights went out, taking in the teacher's expressions with a growing sense of dread. The blackout isn't part of the exercise, is it? No. Aizawa said seriously. It isn't. Well, the plans to attack the camp obviously didn't work. Shigaraki said. So instead of abandoning the quest, they must have decided to keep going after their objectives and attack Ua directly. If they had the balls to do it though, they didn't run it by me at all. Is there anything else you can give us? Nedzu asked. I cannot imagine you would come here without significant leverage. I can tell you the party members and their quirks. Shigaraki offered. They did the little side quest at the mall to try and hide them, which I didn't know about either, for whatever that's worth. Tsukauchi flipped to a new page in his notebook. You've got a deal. What are we up against? The most serious threats will be a fried chicken nugget called Dabi and a psychotic bitch named Toga. Shigaraki said. Fire powers and a quirk that lets her look like anyone, but they're both smart and know what they're doing. In terms of immediate danger, though, you're looking at two escaped convicts. Muscular and Moonfish. I trust you don't need more info on them. Todoroki watched as Suikuchi went pale. No. I think we know their threat level just fine. Shigaraki nodded. Okay then, outside of those four, we've got a couple wild cards. Mustard can create a poison gas, Magna has magnet powers, and Mr. Compress can do what his name says, compress stuff into these puny little marbles. They're all dangerous. Sensei wouldn't have recruited them otherwise. Very well. Nedzu said. Aizawa, get a hold of Present Mike. I think we have a use for radio communications. I will call Mandalay and have her use telepathy to inform the students. Muscular grinned and shook out his fist. How did I do, boss? This is about killing false heroes, not showing off. Spinner complained. Oh, come on now. Mr. Compress cut in. Destroying the wall of Ua with one punch is quite impressive. See? Muscular flexed. Someone appreciates my greatness. Now let's see some blood. Blood. Moonfish's groans sounded almost inspired. Finally. Spinner growled. We have work to do. Yay. Toga jumped up and down. I get to drink all the little heroes' blood. This is gonna be so much fun. Just make sure you get enough. Dabi said. Mustard, cover our path so the local heroes can't give back up. Don't tell me what to do. Mustard growled, but even as he spoke, he was already letting off a large cloud of poisonous gas. These fake heroes don't stand a chance. Before we fight, just remember that Trapper's been exposed. Dabi warned. So if you see him, get him out. Oh, and Shigi's a traitor, so kill him if you get the chance and assume these heroes know your quirks. Hey, as if that'll help him. Muscular cracked his knuckles. These heroes don't stand a chance. Chapter 82. Poison. For once, Nedzu did not have the chance to open the door before Midoriya slammed it open and came barging in. I need my laptop. Nedzu nodded and gestured to the laptop. We received a ping from your program just moments before the loud crash. That means the League has already arrived. Midoriya nodded and crossed to sit at Nedzu's desk, shooing Shigaraki out of his seat so that he could sit down. Based on the lack of fighting, I'm assuming there weren't two traitors after all? No, what does everyone keep thinking that? Shiraki complained. Icy Cat never gave me any info at all. And who are you anyway? Midoriya looked up and glared at him. You can call me cheat code. I'm sure you'll understand why I don't trust you. Shigaraki gulped. Oh. You're the little cheater from the USJ. It's not cheating if it saves lives. Izuku turned back to his computer. Now tell me everything you know. What am I up against? What is that smell? Hagakure sniffed the air. It's like rotten eggs. I'm not sure. Jiro slammed her hand over her mouth and nose as she started to feel lightheaded. I think we should get out of here. It's probably just one of Class 1B's quirks. Hagakure said, more slowly than she should have, which made alarm bells go off inside Jiro's head. No. Jiro heard unfamiliar footsteps and turned toward them to see Spinner and a bunch of people she didn't recognize emerging from the growing mist. It's villains. She was passed out before the villains even noticed her. May dashed through the halls, her tool bag swinging by her side like a weapon as she held the phone to her ear. Come on, pick up. May? Ochako sounded confused when she answered. Do you know what's going on? No time. May snapped quickly. Extra Credit Kun has been kidnapped. Go get him. She hung up and slid down the banister, eyes narrowing in on the door to the maintenance cabinet. She just needed to get to that room and she'd be able to get at least partial power back. Hopefully. She scrambled back as a long blade slammed into the floor in front of her. Flesh. Give me blood. May swallowed and looked up at a guy in a straitjacket who looked even crazier than she was. Oh crap. The minute that Ochako heard that Hiyoshi had been kidnapped, she was by his side within seconds. He was completely covered in Minetta's sticky balls, and Okako cursed under her breath, "Minetta? How did I miss that?" Hitoshi blinked, raising his head about an inch to look at her. "Ocha." "What?" "I'm here." Ochako wasn't quite sure how to grab him without getting stuck. "I'm gonna get you out of here. Where's Minetta?" "Fighting Mina." Hitoshi slumped back down. She figured out he was Trapper. "Okay." Ochako swallowed. "She'd help Mina later. Let's get you someplace safe." "Show me your blood." She ducked down and hid behind Hitoshi just in time to see little Kutra running for his life down the hall as the largest villain Ochako had ever seen reached out to grab him. "Shindig," Ochako whimpered. "I have to. Go. Save him." Hitoshi smiled. "I can still talk, I'll take care of myself." Ochako nodded and disappeared. Sue really hoped that Ochako was okay. She'd left in a hurry, but then again, she usually did these days, so it wouldn't have been too concerning if it hadn't been for the blackout and the phone call right before. She had the feeling there was something else going on besides the exercise. Her night vision was a bit better than normal due to her quirk, but the shadows were still putting her on edge as she made her way through the halls to where Ragdoll was supposed to be. She knew that was most likely the point, since it was a test of courage, but it was still enough to make her pay more attention to her surroundings. That was probably the only reason she didn't miss the knife flying at her out of the corner of her eye. She hopped to the side just in time and the blade embedded itself in the wall instead of her braid. A blonde girl with high buns and what looked like huge needles hanging from her backpack came out from the shadows with a pout. "Ah, but you'd look so much cuter if you were a bit more cut up." Sue swallowed. "No thanks." She didn't recognize this girl from Class 1B, which didn't paint a very nice picture when combined with the blackout and Ochako's sudden disappearance. If there were villains here, then were they under attack? Were they allowed to fight back? What was going on? A voice rang out inside her head, "Students, this is Mandalay. The school is under attack by the League of Villains. As the attack is happening on UA grounds, you are allowed to use your quirks to defend yourselves, but do not initiate attacks. Make your way to the cafeteria as soon as possible." Mandalay then started listing the attackers and their quirks as quickly as she could. Sue gulped as Toga started to circle her, a hungry look on her face. Okay, so those needles must be so that she could gather blood and turn into other people. First priority was to keep Toga from getting her blood, then get away and meet up with the rest of the students. She shifted into a fighting stance, which made Toga smile. "Are you ready to bleed now? You kinda spaced out for a minute and that's no fun. I want you to feel it when I stab you. That way you can enjoy it too." Another knife came flying at her and Sue hopped out of the way. "I think we enjoy different things." Toga scowled and this time, she threw her needles. She was fast and it was all Sue could do to dodge until out of nowhere Toga yelped and stumbled as if she'd taken a hit from behind. Sue felt a hand on her shoulder and whirled around to see a floating head that she thought she recognized as a girl from 1B. "Sorry for scaring you." The girl's head said. "I'm Setsuna, I'm in the other class. Komuro has a plan, but we need to get that girl's gas mask." Sue nodded and flexed her tongue. "I can do that. Students, this is Mandalay. The school is under attack by the League of Villains. As the attack is happening on UA grounds, you are allowed to use your quirks to defend yourselves, but do not initiate attacks. Make your way to the cafeteria as soon as possible. The villains' quirks are as follows. Dabi. Cremation. Spinner. Lizard traits and blood-based paralysis. Toga. Blood-based appearance changes. Mustard. Poison gas. Magna. Magnetism. Mr. Compress. Compression. Trapper. aka Minru Minetta. Sticky hair. May bolted to the nearest tunnel entrance and quickly solved the puzzle to get inside before slamming the door behind her. The knives slammed through the wall, but that psycho couldn't get to her if he didn't know where she was, so she moved quietly as she made her way back to the labs. She really hoped the time she'd waste would be worth it, but there was no way she'd be able to do this without her babies. She dropped down into the lab and grabbed a variety of her projects, both the successes and the failures. The successes would do what they were supposed to and the failures would blow up, so it was a win-win. She ran back to the basement as fast as she could through the tunnels, exiting to the view of the straitjacket guy still attacking the wall where she'd disappeared. He'd almost completely ripped it open by this point, and May got a determined look as she launched a stink bomb into the air. Look alive. The guy turned toward her like some sort of eldritch entity, but soon enough reared back as the stench of the stink bomb filled the hall. May covered her mouth and nose and hoped this actually worked. She'd tried to channel her inner Izuku, and she'd seen that the guy was wearing a blindfold, which meant that he wasn't finding her by sight, which meant that it was either smell or sound, but he hadn't been able to find EHR in the tunnels, and if he had enhanced hearing, then she'd be a shish kebab right now. That left that he was probably smelling for her blood or something creepy like that, and that was easily countered by a stink bomb. She smiled as her opponent became disoriented and she realized that she'd been right. Izuku would be so proud. She grabbed one of her failed babies that was supposed to be an early version of her jetpack and turned it on before launching it at the guy's head. It exploded about a second earlier than she'd hoped, but it was still enough to force him back. She ran for the maintenance room door, only to find her path blocked by knives. Again. This was getting old. Blood. Flesh. What a mad banquet of darkness. May felt hands grab her and she yelped as she was carried around the corner by one of the hero students with a full 6 arms. Are you hurt? You're one of the support students, right? We need to run. No, what we need is to get the power back on. May pushed the student, Shoji if she remembered right, away. And to do that, I need to get in that stupid room. Shoji blinked for a moment and nodded, all right. Then Tokiyami and I will help you. Stay behind us. He raised his arms into a shield and raised himself up to his full height. May got ready to run. They were running out of time. It took longer than he preferred to figure out where the hell Mustard was and lure Mina into an affected area. He had his gas mask, obviously, so he wasn't affected, but the stupid pink idiot could hold her breath for an infuriatingly long time. At least she was out of the way now, but Minetta was definitely not in a good mood as he finally hurried back to where he'd left Shinso. Sending that text as a threat to cheat code hadn't seemed like a risk at the time, but then again, he hadn't been planning on running into one of his classmates. He breathed a sigh of relief when Shinso was still there, stuck to the floor exactly where he'd left him. He hadn't even woken up yet. Minetta chuckled and kicked Shinso in the ribs. Wake up, sleeping beauty, rise and shine. Shinso blinked, bleary-eyed and raised his head. What? What time is it? Minetta immediately looked at his watch. If he was correct, Shinso's quirk relied on confusing his target, so no matter what, he needed to know what he was talking about. 11 p.m. His eyes widened as Shinso smirked. Got ya. What are you? Apparently he was just confused enough by Shinso's reaction for the quirk to kick in because he felt his brain go fuzzy and his arms fell limp at his sides. Dissolve these stupid things and let me go. Minetta had no choice but to obey. Chapter 83. Battles. Dabi was supposed to be able to focus on traumatizing Shoto tonight, but no. Of course he had to go and find the stupid gamer boy who should never have been put in charge of the league to begin with and kill him. Trapper had tried to give them as much info on the school's layout as possible, but it'd be built by a literal rat, so it was a maze. Speaking of the rat, Dabi was betting that he'd find Shigaraki right in his office. It was probably near the center, basing things on a traditional rat maze, but he wasn't too concerned about solving anything right now. That was what the new recruits' quirks were for, after all. Just compress the walls in front of us. Dabi ordered. We're not playing by the rules of their little game. The frog girl was pretty cute, and Himiko was still deciding on her opinion when it came to Mushroom Girl, but she thought the lizard girl could definitely use some improvements. Why don't you bleed when you split apart? You'd be so much cuter if you just bled a little more. Yeah, because that's not creepy at all. Setsuna muttered. The disembodied hands were grasping at the ugly gas mask around Himiko's neck, and she would have given it up if it hadn't also been connected to her blood canisters to let her drink on the go. Not that she had any blood in them at the moment, but she was working on that. Come on. I just want a little taste of your blood. Himiko cried out. I'm only gonna hurt you a little, doesn't that sound like fun? No. All three girls answered in unison, and it would have been cute if they were just bloodied up a little more. The frog girl's tongue came barreling toward her again, and she managed to slash it with her knife, but the attack created an opening for the lizard girl to send a leg and kick her in the back of the knees, which then allowed the frog girl to wrap her tongue around the mask and pull. The tubing popped out and Toga scowled as she stood back up. That was totally not cute. Setsuna, get out of here. The mushroom girl said. Asui, put on the mask. Call me Sue. The frog girl said, putting on the mask. Oh, Sue? Himiko's eyes lit up. What a cute name. The frog girl glared at her from above the mask. Only my friends get to call me Sue. Himiko smiled. Well, I guess this means we're friends, th. Her voice cut out when she suddenly stopped being able to breathe. There was a slight mist in the air. Mustard? No. The mushroom girl answered. Spores. You're not getting anybody's blood tonight. The mist disappeared, but she could still feel it in her lungs as her vision went spotty. Wah. The lizard girl ran back up. I found a rope, let's tie her up. Well, that hadn't been fun at all. Shoji shielded Mei with his arms as Dark Shadow grappled with Moonfish. Shoji could use some armor for his arms, but she'd have to be careful not to restrict his range of movement. Maybe something like a cape, made of Kevlar obviously, and Tokiyami's needed some more in terms of defense and maybe some offense too, but she'd have to experiment in. Mei forced herself to pay attention to the fight and brave someone for babies. Just some taser marbles, so nothing fancy, but still effective enough that a faceful of them was able to keep Moonfish from slicing off one of Shoji's extra arms. As soon as Moonfish reared back, Shoji dashed forward and yanked the door to the maintenance room open. Go. We'll make sure he doesn't follow you. Mei nodded and dropped one more stink bomb, just to make sure Moonfish still couldn't rely on his sense of smell, then ran into the maintenance room. She slammed the door behind her and Mei turned on a flashlight and opened her tool bag. All right, time to get this baby working again. Shinso ran through the halls, trying to put as much distance between himself and Minetta as he could. He'd ordered him to go turn himself into the teachers, but Hitoshi wasn't stupid. He knew that the likelihood of something knocking Minetta out of his control before then was almost a guarantee, and he didn't want to be anywhere near the creep when that happened. Izuku had warned them that there had to be another traitor. Why hadn't they focused harder on figuring out Trapper's identity? He scrambled back when Spinner dropped from the ceiling right in front of him. Hello again, hero. We didn't quite get the chance to finish our conversation last time. Ochako teleported to Kutra. Hey, I'm gonna get you out of here, okay? It's him. It's muscular. He killed my mom and dad. Kutra's eyes widened and he pointed over her shoulder. Watch out. A punch barred into her from the side, knocking her through the wall. She groaned and stood up to see the huge villain gloating as he towered over her. This is the hero they sent after me? A puny little girl? Ochako shifted into a fighting stance, a puny little girl who beat All Might in a fair fight. The villain laughed. Oh, you've got spunk, but even All Might couldn't beat me. I'm gonna love killing you. Ochako grit her teeth, and I'm gonna love beating that stupid grin off your face. She felt a tingle run down her spine just in time for Muscular to throw a massive quirk-enhanced punch right at her face. She channeled One for All and moved faster than she thought possible, grabbing him in preparation for a judo flip and activating her quirk so that she could actually slip him completely over her shoulder and slam him into the ground. It didn't even keep him down for a second. He twisted her arm and she helped as she felt the bone snap. Pathetic. Maybe killing the kid will be more fun. She bit her lip and launched herself at him. Don't touch him. The most she'd ever teleported on repeat had been when she'd first developed her quirk. Ever since she'd learned to control her jumps, she hadn't teleported for more than 2 or 3 times in a row. The only exception had been the mall, but even then, she'd only been teleporting herself. The only time she'd teleported on repeat with another person in tow had been that one time with All Might, and that had only been twice. She knew it'd be draining, but at the moment, she really couldn't bring herself to care. She grabbed onto Muscular and teleported to every single one of her classmates, not staying at any of them long enough for Muscular to get his bearings. Around number 10, she started getting nauseous, but she didn't stop. She wasn't going to let this guy hurt Kutra or anybody else. She let loose a guttural yell as she teleported to Aizawa, pouting as she threw a now exhausted Muscular to the floor. It took her a minute to push down her nausea and realize that there was now an entire roomful of people that were all staring at her in shock. Shigaraki was sitting right next to Izuku, who was sitting at Nedzu's desk, which was the only reason why she didn't immediately grab him and give him the same treatment as Muscular. He gave a low whistle, and this is why I'm glad I'm switching sides. You're still on thin ice, Izuku said without looking up. Eraserhead can handle this goon if he wakes up. Hitoshi got himself out, but we know he's a target, so back him up. The teachers are getting the rest of the students. Ochako nodded, got it. See you soon. Minetta cursed under his breath as he put on his gas mask. That stupid brainwasher. How had he gotten the jump on him so quickly? And now his bait for cheat code was gone and the entire attack was going so far off of the plans that it wasn't even close to the same attack. He was out of backup plans to his backup plans and now was firmly in the improvisation territory, which was not where a trapper preferred to be. He took a deep breath. He could still make this work in his favor. Sure, he'd let Shinso slip through his fingers, but Mustard had already set up the gas trap and he just needed to make sure as many of his classmates as possible got caught in it. Most of them still didn't know he was the traitor, so he'd just lure them into the gas and take down as many as he could. He saw Zero up ahead, his freakishly large elbows backlit against what little light there was. Hey, do you know what's going on? Zero's eyes widened and instead of greeting him like a friend as Minetta had expected, Zero immediately shot out his tape. Guys, the traitor's here, get him. Minetta swore and used his balls to stick Zero's tape to the wall instead of to him, but he wasn't quite sure what other backup Zero had. Who had he been paired with for the exercise? What members of 1B were around? It had to be more than one person from what Zero had said, so the safest option was, well, to do what he planned to begin with. He may not have planned to have his classmates know his true intentions already, but actually this made his job ironically easier. Catch me if you can, bitches. Minetta muttered under his breath. Until you can't breath, that is. He ran as fast as he could in the direction of the gas, running just slow enough that his classmates stayed focused on him and not on the gathering mist until it was too late. He could hear multiple sets of footsteps, probably between 3 and 5, so a good number if everyone fell for his trap. He adjusted his gas mask and kept running until he heard a few thumps behind him, then turned around and doubled back. Zero and a brown-haired kid from 1B had fallen for it, but whatever others there were had gotten away. Minetta shrugged it off and went to go find more students. There was no lack of targets wandering the halls at this point, he just had to find some more prey. Hitoshi swallowed and stared down Spinner. What conversation? Last I remember you were trying to kill me. Spinner frowned. You said I had other people in my head. Explain what you meant. Oh. Hitoshi hesitated. He could take control right now, but Spinner didn't seem intent on killing him at the moment and he could always brainwash him later. Izuku was always emphasizing how important information was and for some reason, Hitoshi was intrigued. Oh, okay. It was just one other presence, but it just felt like there were two minds? Two consciousnesses, kinda? It's hard to explain. But whose? Spinner looked so confused and almost angry. Whose mind is it? I don't know. Hitoshi's mind spun. He did not want an angry hero killer. I might be able to brainwash it though. To interrogate it. I don't know how else to figure it out, sorry. Hitoshi silently cursed himself. He had just offered to brainwash the angry murderer. Of course that was a brilliant plan. Way to not make his opponent angry. Do it. Hitoshi reared back in surprise. What? Do it. Spinner ordered again. I'm not going to have other people messing with my head, not while I go about Stain's important mission. I need to know what I am fighting, so figure it out or I swear on Stain's blood that I will cut you down where you stand. Okay. Hitoshi took control immediately. That's a pretty convincing reason to brainwash somebody, not gonna lie. He took a deep breath and hoped this actually worked. Honestly, brainwashing Dark Shadow from Tokiyami's brain had been hard enough, and he was still working on taking half control so that people could actually talk under his brainwashing, so there was every chance this was going to blow up in his face. But if it didn't, it would be really cool. First, he focused on Spinner's mind until he could feel the other presence inside it, then he pushed a little forward. The other mind didn't resist his control, not in the way Dark Shadow's had. In fact, it was almost like it knew what he was trying to do and hesitantly approved of the plan. After he had control of both, he let go of Spinner, not trusting himself to be able to successfully interrogate if he was trying to brainwash multiple people, and oddly enough, he was pretty sure that Spinner wasn't going to kill him until he figured out who the other presence was, so it was a pretty safe move. Or at least, Hitoshi hoped so. Then he dialed back his control. He gave the other presence just enough control to be able to speak, but carefully kept enough that it should answer his questions. If everything went according to plan, so it was about a 50-50 shot. Hitoshi carefully thought through the wording of his question before speaking, careful to phrase his question as an order. Tell me who you are. Spinner's voice spoke blankly. I am Stain, the hero killer. It took all of Hitoshi's willpower to not drop his control right then and there. I thought you were dead. Hitoshi said. Tell us how you're here. A part of me was torn out when All for One stole my quirk. Stain answered. He is the one who had me killed. Spinner let out a guttural scream and Hitoshi stumbled back at the sheer rage emanating from him, losing both his control and his footing. He scrambled back as Spinner drew his katana. He lied. Sensei lied. He told me that the heroes killed Stain. He lied. Hitoshi didn't know what to say, just scrambled backwards to put as much distance as he could between himself and the hero killers. Both of them. Oh no. He needed to ask a question and quickly. He froze, no need for Spinner's, Stain's, paralyzation quirk, when the hero killers turned on him. I have no reason to kill you, for now. Spinner said, fire in his eyes. I have more important prey to take care of. He leapt onto the wall and scurried away and Hitoshi waited for him to disappear completely before falling onto his back in relief. What the heck just happened? Ochako suddenly appeared beside him. What did I miss? Chapter 84. Light. Monoma did a double take as soon as he saw the obvious pair of villains literally carving their way towards Nedzu's office. Well, now, that's interesting. Pony grabbed his arm. Stop. Teachers will take care of them. We run. Monoma scoffed and shook his arm loose. You can run if you want, but I know you've noticed the gap between us and 1A. What's the difference? Not our test scores, that's for sure. They've fought real villains. I'm not going to let them keep leaving us in the dust. Pony hesitated for a moment before giving a determined nod. We go. Monoma grinned and cracked his neck. Let's do this. Try to pin the guy in the yellow coat. He looks like he's got a useful quirk. I want it. Shoji hissed and grabbed his arm. The hand wasn't a big loss. He could grow it back. What was an issue was that Dark Shadow hadn't taken kindly to one of its friends being hurt. As soon as Tokiyami had seen Moonfish hurt him, he'd completely lost control and Dark Shadow had started going berserk. It had gone after Moonfish first, thankfully, and the villain was somewhere down the hall with who knew how many broken bones, but now Dark Shadow was stalking anything that moved, which was unfortunately mostly Shoji. Tokiyami was trying to get it to calm down, but wasn't having much success. Suddenly, There was a cheer from inside the maintenance room and Shoji felt a stab of fear as Dark Shadow zeroed in on the noise. It let out a massive roar and launched itself at the door. Shoji knew that the wall wouldn't stand a chance and that support student wouldn't be able to do a thing against it before she'd be torn to shreds. He took a step forward, not knowing what he could do, but at the same time knowing he had to do something. And then the lights turned on. Dark Shadow whimpered in the suddenly harsh lighting and Tokiyami was almost sobbing with relief as Shoji went to go comfort him. The agent of chaos must have restored the power. What a mad banquet of darkness, but I think I'd prefer to stay in the light for now. Shoji nodded. Yeah. That sounds like a good plan. Kendo was lightheaded even now that the gas was finally clearing up. This poison gas smelled nasty and she would have known to avoid it even without Mandalay's warning, but knowing all the villains' quirk definitely gave them an advantage, as did knowing who the traitor really was. She thought she'd seen Minetta through the fog once or twice, but every time she tried to chase him, he disappeared before she could find him. At least she and Tetsu had knocked out that mustard kid. Now, though, they had to find everyone who had passed out from the gas and get them to Recovery Girl. Hopefully nobody but Tetsu had gotten hit with any bullets, but Kendo wasn't counting on that, so they needed to hurry. She made her hands as big as she could and started running. Come on, let's grab everyone we can and get back to the Pussycats. Pony shot her horns forward and snagged Mr. Compress's coat. Dabi, wait. Dabi glared back and shot a stream of fire in the student's general direction. Get yourself out of it, you dumbass, or I'm leaving you behind. Compress sounded like he was pouting underneath his mask. But my coat will rip. Dabi rolled his eyes. Suit yourself, I've got a traitor to take care of. Monoma waited until he was around the corner before dashing forward and ripping Compress's glove off. And now, let's see what your quirk can really do. What are you talking about? Compress sounded confused. My quirk is. He disappeared and Monoma was left holding a marble. Okay, this is going to be nice. Ochako sighed after Hitoshi finished filling her in. Okay, so what now? Well, the lights are back on. Hitoshi shrugged. And I'm no longer being targeted by a serial killer, so, maybe go back to the teachers? Maybe, Ochako frowned. But I feel like the biggest threats are still out there. Like Shigaraki? Hitoshi asked. No, he's apparently on our side now. Ochako answered absently. Hitoshi blinked. Wait, what? Izuku was being almost polite to him when I dropped in earlier. Ochako said. I think he's the one who gave Mandalay the info on the villain's quirks. Oh. Hitoshi frowned. I guess I was wrong about Todoroki being the traitor then. Detective Tsukauchi was there too, Ochako said. So I think he interrogated both of them. I don't know what's going on, but I'm just scared that Kurogiri is going to teleport in and mess everything up. If I just had an anchor on him, then you'd be able to keep up. Hitoshi nodded. I can brainwash him long enough for you to touch him. I don't think the villains have figured out my quirk yet. Minetta thought it was based on confusion, so. We're still in the cellar. I just hope he's still around. Ochako said. If he is. He's probably after Shigaraki for turning on them. She grabbed Hitoshi and felt the world shift as they jumped. A second later, they were in Nedzu's office and Hitoshi was taking deep breaths to calm the nausea. I think I'm actually starting to get used to that. What do you guys need? Izuku said. Now that the power's back, I'm kinda busy figuring out how to best use the weapon systems. We were hoping to track Kurogiri. Hitoshi answered. Figured here was a good place to start, since the villains are probably going to be after Dusty here. I'd be offended if you weren't right. Shigaraki whined. Yeah, Todoroki drawled. You knew what the consequences of switching parties would be. Shiragaki groaned, the cat on his lap nuzzling up to his face to try and comfort him. Don't remind me. I'm still worried about the big boss. The big boss? Todoroki asked. Your sensei? Shigaraki nodded, all for one. Nedzu nodded grimly. Then I will call All Might and tell him to be prepared for an attack. It is a good thing that young Mei managed to get the power back on so we can bolster our defenses. What did I do? Mei popped her head out from a secret tunnel in the ceiling. Oh, hi? What's one of the villains doing here? Switching sides. Izuku answered. Now get down here and man Nedzu's computer. The students have taken care of most of the villains, but Minetta and Spinner are still on the loose. Mei nodded and jumped down. Any others we need to worry about? Just this one. Izuku pressed the button that opened the door to Nedzu's office, revealing one very surprised villain who had been about to blow down the door. Welcome, Dabi. We've been expecting you. Chapter 85. Brothers. There was a long moment of awkward silence as the heroes just stared at Dabi, who stared right back. Shoto thought Midoriya was absolutely insane for opening the door like he was inviting in a friend, not a villain, but he had to respect the audacity of the power move. It immediately put the heroes at an advantage and took away the element of surprise that Dabi had almost definitely been counting on. Finally Nedzu broke the silence. Oh my, this office is getting rather crowded, isn't it? Dabi responded by sending a stream of fire directly at Shigaraki, but Shoto created an ice wall to protect him just in time. The wall melted immediately under the heat of Dabi's flames, and Shoto glared at him. Don't you dare touch him. Ippor hissed in agreement and launched herself at Dabi, scratching at his scars and the staples on his face until Dabi ripped her off and flung her away with a snarl. Get out of my way, Shoto Todoroki. So Minetta told you my name. Shoto rolled his eyes. How impressive. Aizawa stepped in front of them. Cheat code, you take the others back to your lab. Use the tunnels, we'll deal with him. Fat chance. Dabi tried to shoot more fire, but Aizawa shot him with a glare. Oh, fuck this. He reached his hand into his pocket and grabbed something. Aizawa rushed forward, but Dabi just smirked. Too late, he's already on his way. Nedzu's fur stood on end, and who would that be? A swirl of purple mist appeared in the middle of the room and Kurogiri stepped out. You called? Minetta was stuck to the wall, hiding in a patch of shadows near the ceiling as he watched the students gathering. The pussycats were doing a head count of all the students while the UA teachers stood off to one side, handcuffing all of the villains that the students had managed to take down. They had done a lot better than he'd thought they would, or maybe it was just that his allies had done worse, because the only villains missing from the captured pile were Dabi, Kurogiri, and himself. And now the lights were back on. This entire attack was turning into a disaster and Minetta didn't know how to turn it around, not with their current numbers. However, they couldn't afford to fail either, because failure meant that they lost Shigaraki, who knew enough to cripple them. Which was probably why their attack had failed in the first place. They needed to pull out something that the heroes couldn't predict, something that Shigaraki's knowledge wouldn't help against, something so powerful that no matter even if they knew what they were up against, they wouldn't be able to fight. Minetta pulled out the phone he'd stolen from Kaminari. They needed the big guns. Ochako looked over at Hitoshi, who nodded and both of them rushed forward. What do you think you're doing here? Hitoshi yelled. If you want to get to him, you're going to have to go through us. What are you? Kurogiri went limp just in time for Ochako to barrel into him and knock him from the brainwashing. She scrambled to her feet with a grin as Kurogiri started floating. Got ya. Ochako put her hands together. Release. Dabi scowled and turned to Kurogiri. Never mind, you useless waste of oxygen. I'll handle Shigaraki myself. Kurogiri nodded and disappeared and Ochako grabbed Hitoshi's hand. Let me know if you need me to stop. Hitoshi's expression hardened. I'll stop when we catch him. Gravity shifted and they ended up on top of the school, but the moment they got there, Kurogiri left again. After 3 more jumps of his, Ochako stopped. He's trying to wear us out. Hitoshi looked green. It's working. Ochako bit her lip and looked around. They'd ended up in one of the fake cities that UA used as a training ground, if I can just get. Oh, I'm an idiot. What? Hitoshi foreign-wed. What did you just realize? Well, Ochako started. I can determine more or less where around my target I appear, right? So if I appear close enough, then I can grab him and bring him back. Only if you're fast enough to do that before he gets away from you. Hitoshi pointed out. His teleporting hasn't been throwing yours off, has it? Not enough that I can't make this work. Ochako's eyes were determined as she dropped Hitoshi's hand. I'll be back soon. Hitoshi nodded, and I'll be waiting. Shoto glanced back and forth between Shigaraki and Dabi before turning to Midoriya. There's a tunnel entrance just right here, right? The one your girlfriend came out of. Midoriya looked like he was about to say something else before he stopped himself with a blush. Yeah. The one my girlfriend came out of. That one. Shout didn't have time to figure out that reaction, nor did he think that was the most important thing to worry while there was a psychopathic flame killer after them. I'll stay back and help Aizawa, you two get Dusty to safety. Hatsume nodded, got it. Do I get any say in this? Shigaraki complained. No. Midoriya answered shortly. Good luck, Todoroki. If you're going to do something, do it quickly. Aizawa snapped. I do have to blink eventually. Shoto glared at Dabi and went to stand beside Aizawa. Go. We got this. I believe that I shall accompany you. Nedzu said to Midoriya. I do not believe the computers in this room will be functional for that much longer. Your workroom has a better setup. And whose fault is that? Midoriya responded. There was a scramble behind them as they got into the tunnels, but Shoto was more concerned with the staring contest he was having with Dabi, who looked confused and angry. Since when are you all buddy-buddy with Shigaraki? Shatuo shrugged, since my old man kicked me out and he was the one who kinda took me in. Dabi did a double take. Wait, Dad kicked you out? He didn't even kick me out. Shoto froze, his thoughts racing as he tried to make sense of that until everything finally clicked. Tsuyu? Kurogiri knew he hadn't completely shaken the girl, Uraraka. That would have been a ridiculous assumption. If what Trapper had said was correct, she now had a permanent tag on him that could not be removed without a significant change in weight, and it would not be safe to return to the base until that happened. He could starve himself for a few days, that would be simple enough, but there was the question of if the change would be sufficient. There was also the option of amputation, but he did not want to impact his usefulness to Sensei if he could help it. Basically, for the moment, he was out of good options. He felt something barrel into him, and then all of a sudden, the world was shifting just like it did when he warped. He knew the girl must have grabbed him and forced him to teleport, but why would she do something like that? He was used to teleporting and ending up in a new location, so there was no way she could throw him off using that strategy. He readied himself for a fight before he even figured out where he had ended up, and his eyes widened when he heard Tamura's voice. I'm not coming back. Will you stop trying to grab me already? You surely can't be abandoning Sensei so easily. Kurogiri felt his brain go blank again, realizing too late that young Tamura was nowhere to be seen. He'd fallen for their ruse, and this time, there was no one around to knock him out of it. He was somewhere within the UA training grounds and alone with the teleporter and the brainwasher. Wonderful. All right, Hitoshi. The girl said. He's all yours. The brainwasher, Hitoshi Shinso, came into view, fiddling with a mask on his face that Kurogiri recognized as the support item he'd used during the sports festival. His quirk must have something to do with his voice, then, rather than confusion as Trapper had suggested. Sensei would be pleased. I am really getting sick of this stupid sensation. Shinso muttered. Multiple people in the same head, which based on Spinner's answer, means you've got someone else's quirk. So? Whose quirks do you have? Kurogiri didn't answer, obviously. He didn't even know what Shinso was talking about. He wasn't a Nomu, he was simply Kurogiri. That was who he was, and that was who he had always been. Shinso facepalmed. Oh, right. I need to phrase it as an order, not a question. Tell me what quirks you have. Warpgate is created from multiple quirks. Kurogiri answered, the shock of his response almost enough to knock him from the brainwashing. Not quite, unfortunately, but Kurogiri's brain was absolutely reeling. He was a Nomu. He was just another one of the doctor's creations. But the Nomu were slaves and he was Sensei's trusted servant. Right? Okay. Shinso hummed thoughtfully. Tell me where you got them. All for One gave them to me. Kurogiri answered. He stole them from their original holders. Ask him more about All for One. Uraraka said. I'm pretty sure he has something to do with One for All. Shinso nodded. Tell me about All for One and his connection with One for All. As soon as he'd said his name, Dabi turned tail and ran. Shoto gave chase as he threw himself out the window and Shoto used an ice slide to follow him. Dabi, no, Tsuyu, snarled as he shot another jet of flame in Shoto's direction, melting the slide so the other heroes would have difficulty following. So you figured it out. What? You want a gold star or something? No, but an explanation would be nice. Shoto dodged the attack and shot back with an ice spear. I thought you were dead. Yeah, well maybe it should have stayed that way. Dabi snapped. What you guy going to do now? Go away to the old man. Are you kidding? I haven't talked to Endeavor in weeks. Shoto said. He kicked me out, remember? Why? Dabi huffed but didn't send out any more flames, which was progress. Why would the great Endeavor kick out his masterpiece? He was trying to prove that I needed him and his power to succeed. Shoto shrugged, and I figured out that I didn't. Dabi was silent for a long moment before he suddenly cracked up laughing. That is a bigger fuck you to Dad than I've ever even though of. Are you even going to be a hero? If I do, it won't be full time. Shoto said. I'm actually making a name for myself as a gamer, so I want to see where that goes before I commit to anything. A gamer. Dabi cackled harder. Endeavor's perfect masterpiece is dropping out of heroics to be a gamer? Oh my god, that's amazing. Shoto considered pointing out that he might not be dropping out of heroic entirely, at least not right wavy, but figured at this point that strategy might start another boss fight, so it was probably better to just keep his mouth shut and let his brother have this. Eventually, Dabi stopped laughing and gave him Anid, do me a favor and don't tell Dad I'm alive. I've got plans for how to devastate him even more than his failed masterpiece already has. Shoto smiled. I guess I look forward to seeing what you come up with then. Dabi shook his head and laughed as he walked away, a gamer. Shatuo rolled his eyes. He took pride in being a disappointment, so Dabi's reaction didn't really bother him. He needed to reunite with the students and I can't believe you got him to just walk away. Shatuo tried to shoot a stream of fire in the direction of the voice, but his quirk didn't work. Shoto deflated in relief. Oh Aizawa, it's just you. How much of that did you hear? Enough. Aizawa's hair fell. But don't worry. It would be illogical for me to spill a secret you already promised to keep. Plus I'm curious too. Also, he shot out his capture weapon and caught Shoto as he couldn't run away. We need to talk about your current living situation. All for One was angry. He was a patient man. He enjoyed pulling strings and then watching those tiny actions have great effects over decades. He had been looking forward to the sweet devastation on All Might's face when he realized Shigaraki's true identity for almost 15 years now, and yet, that plan had been ruined in a moment by the stupid child's teenage rebellion. He'd raised Shigaraki to be his masterpiece and carefully controlled his upbringing so that he would never question it, but no, somehow when he wasn't looking, Tamura had decided that he wanted to be normal, as if that was even a possibility. Well, All Might's face when he realized he'd been too slow to save his master's grandchild from being murdered by his arch-nemesis would not be quite as exquisite, but it would make a half-decent consolation prize. It would have been easiest to have Kurogiri warp him over to Ua, but for some reason, he was unable to get in contact with that particular project, which probably meant he had fallen into the hands of the heroes. It was a terrible loss, one that he could undoubtedly blame Tamura for, but at the very least, it would lead to the heroes learning his true identity, which would deal a powerful psychological blow in All for One's favor. Not ideal, but it was something he could work with, and arriving normally would make for a grander entrance anyway. He stood in front of the Ua gates, undamaged so far. The heroes inside hadn't yet called for outside backup, Most likely because they had the attack under control and to avoid any negative press coverage that could damage the school. All for One smiled. They wouldn't be able to cover it up after what he was about to do. He held up his hand, air cannon ×3. Chapter 86. Identities. Ochako paced back and forth across the street of the fake city. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know. Hitoshi shrugged sympathetically. Maybe he forgot? Forgot about a lifelong nemesis, Hitoshi? Ochako huffed. No. He just didn't want to tell me. I mean, he told me that he had enemies, but I mean, he's the #1 hero, so of course he does, but someone who has killed or at least brutally injured pretty much every single holder of one for all. That seems like something he should have mentioned before I agreed to the quirk, right? Hitsuhi rubbed his temples. I agree completely. Ochako stopped. Are you okay? I'm fine. Hitoshi did not look fine. It's just that maintaining half control is a little more taxing than full control, and I've had Kurogiri under for a while. I am so sorry. Ochako gasped. We can deal with All for One later. What else do we need from this guy? I'm not sure. Hitoshi said. I can just order him to go to sleep, but... Okay. So he said that all of the quirks that made Warpgate were stolen, didn't he? Yeah. Ochako nodded. Why? Well, I'm just wondering. Hitoshi turned to Kurogiri. Tell me if you chose to work for All for One. No. Kurogiri said blankly. Then tell me why you work for him. Hitoshi insisted. Kurogiri seemed to fight the brainwashing for a moment before he answered, because he erased my memories and brainwashed me into being devoted to him. Both Ochako and Hitoshi were shocked into silence for a long moment before Hitoshi managed to shake himself out of it. Okay, then Well, I order you to not be devoted to All for One anymore. And to remember what he forced you to forget. Can you even do that? Ochako asked. Hitoshi took a deep breath. There's only one way to find out. He dropped his control and they both dropped into fighting stances, but Kurogiri didn't fight them. Instead, the mist gradually receded until it was just covering the hair on his head, and he looked at them with bright yellow eyes that looked lost and a bit more than a little panicked. Hi. My name is Oboro Shirakumo. Nice to meet you? Ochako glanced over to Hitoshi, who shrugged. I guess it worked. The ground shook, almost knocking the three of them over, and Shirakumo gulped. He's here. Izuku stared at the screen in shock. Half the school was gone. Before the ground started shaking, everything had been fine. Hitoshi and Uraraka had managed to catch Shirakumo, Dabi was fighting Todoroki, and the only villains still missing were Minetta and Spinner. Everything was fine. He sent some of the spider bots to the destroyed area, since the cameras there were obviously shot. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the dark figure advance. He wasn't quite sure who he was, just that whatever was about to happen couldn't be good. He felt a chill run down his spine as May jumped up from his seat and whirl around. Stay right where you are or I swear I will unleash all of my babies on you. I won't even blink. Izuku jerked his head around to see one of Kurogiri's portals appearing right behind him, and he only got more tense when Shinso stepped out, followed by someone they didn't recognize. The cat on Shigaraki's lap spat at the newcomer, and Shigaraki had fallen into a fighting stance same as May. Hitoshi held up his hand. Whoa guys, I can explain. It's just me. May eyed him suspiciously. And where's Ochako? She went to fight All Might. Hitoshi scowled. We think it's his long-last nemesis who just knocked down our front door. Yeah, that's sensei. Shigaraki said. But who is this noob? I'm offended you don't recognize me, Tamura. It's me, Kurogiri. The newcomer frowned. Shirakumo. Sorry. I'm trying to undo a decade's worth of brainwashing and it's kind of causing problems. Shigaraki looked like his entire world had just flipped upside down as Hitoshi confirmed. Shirakumo is planning on pulling a Dusty and switching sides now that I got rid of all of one's brainwashing. And got some of his memories back, so he's with us. Yuka glared at the two of them suspiciously. The League has someone who can change appearances. I still need you to prove that it's you, Hitoshi. Okay. Hitoshi frowned thoughtfully, She can't imitate quirks, just faces. Shigaraki said helpfully. So just brainwash his faker and make him tell you who he really is. Two birds. One stone. The man who claimed to be Kurogiri looked mildly offended, but nodded. If that's what I have to do to prove my sincerity, then I'll do it. Hitoshi nodded. Are you sure? Shirakumo took a deep breath. Yes, I am. Hitoshi took control and winced. I'm kinda starting to reach my limit, buddy, but tell me who you are. I am Oboro Shirakumo, also known as Kurogiri. Shinso dropped his control with a huff. There, is that good enough? Izuku nodded. Yeah. There was another crash and Yuka ran back to his computer. All Might is here. Toshinori cured himself for being so slow. If he was still at the height of his power, he could have gathered to Ua near instantly, or at least had enough resilience to catch a ride back with Uraraka after she had come to inform him about All for One's allies attacking the school, but no. As it was, he had to survive his strength and couldn't run faster than the eye could see. He'd grown even weaker since the USJ incident and especially since giving his quirk to young Uraraka. It didn't help that her constant disappearances and association with wall gremlins was quickly giving him gray hairs. All that combined to say that he'd really been hoping that All for One was as dead as he'd appeared 5 years ago. But unfortunately that was clearly not the case. All for One knocked him through another wall and All Might spat out another mouthful of blood as he forced himself to his feet. I will not let you hurt my students. Ironically, it's not actually one of your students I'm after, it's my own. All for One replied amicably. Well, perhaps with the exception of your successor, but she's a slippery one. You stay away from her. Toshinori snarled. I won't have you hurting her like you hurt Master Shimura. Funny you should mention your old mentor. All for One grinned widely. Have I ever mentioned Tamura Shigaraki's true identity? Well, he's an asshole, Shigaraki said. And here I thought he would have picked up anybody he thought he could manipulate. Izuku and Mei had managed to get some shaky audio from the few remaining cameras, but even with the poor quality audio, they could have heard a pin drop as All for One detailed the way he had handpicked Shigaraki just because of his connection to One for All. Hitoshi snorted at Shigaraki's reaction. You just learned that the guy who raised you basically only took you in to hurt All Might and that's all you have to say? What? Are you saying I'm wrong? Shigaraki asked defensively, and besides, he didn't do most of the work, his lackeys did, like Kuro. Shira. Whatever over there. If I'm allowed to put my 2 cents in, Shirakumo said dryly. May I just say that raising you was not easy. The room shook again as All Might launched forward and the titans started clashing again. This room is gonna come down soon. Mei frowned. Dust Boy. Disintegrate the ceiling. Portal Man. Make sure the dust doesn't get into the computers. Dust Boy? Shigaraki balked. Just do it, Tamura. Shirakumo said tiredly. I'll make sure debris doesn't fall on us from above. Destroy the room before it has a chance to destroy us. Izuku nodded thoughtfully. Smart. Not an option for the other students though. I'm gonna give the group chat a clue for how to get into the tunnels. There's 1 or 2 places that can act as bomb shelters, so I'll go ahead and send them a map. They just have to get there before All Might and All for One destroy the entire school. Easy. There was a long moment of awkward silence and they all shared matching grimaces as they realized how not easy that would be. Finally, Shirakumo cleared his throat. Maybe I can help. Unlike your friend Uraraka, I specialize in transporting large amounts of people at the same time. No good. Mei said quickly. They won't trust you. They don't have to. Shirakumo said sheepishly. Not if I'm quick enough. Izuku blinked. So you're suggesting kidnapping our classmates for their own good? Hitoshi smiled. Well, it won't be the first time you'd have done that. The room shook again and a few things fell off the shelves. Izuku's expression hardened. Do it. Ochako knew she'd be safer inside instead of holding herself in midair above the school, but even though she knew Izuku probably had eyes on the fight, she couldn't bring herself to leave. In a way, this was her fight too. She was the next holder of One for All, and therefore All for One was her rival too. If All Might fell, she was the only one strong enough to pick up the fight. As if on cue, All for One launched another superpowered punch at All Might, who barely managed to hold his ground. The media was starting to warm and Ochako noticed a few helicopters in the air with her. "Come on, All Might." Ochako muttered, "You can do this. Get up and fight him." All Might, however, wasn't nearly as strong as he had been. Ochako gasped as the dust and steam cleared to reveal All Might looking ragged and deflated in his smaller form. She could only imagine how the media reacted, but she didn't have time to think on it because the moment she saw All Might in danger, she was suddenly right in front of him. She released her quirk and landed in a crouch, slowly standing and doing her best to stare down All for One when he didn't have eyes. "I think it's time we finally met," Ochako said, doing her best to keep her voice from shaking. "I'm Ochako Uraraka, the 9th holder of One for All, and I'm here to take you down." Chapter 87. Anger. "Has anyone seen Shinso or Ochako?" Mina yelled. "I can't find them anywhere." The hallway was crowded with both hero and support course students, as almost every single person currently on campus huddled together to try and find some protection. The building kept shaking like it was going to collapse, but Cementos had, so far, been pretty good at keeping things from splitting apart. He'd only be able to last for so long though, so everyone with a shielding quirk was getting ready for action. She was too, even though she could only hope that her acid would be faster than the falling debris, but she was determined to do whatever she could. They would have evacuated. If they weren't sure that whatever was going on out there was 100 times worse than whatever they were experiencing. No, going outside was not going to happen. There was a swirl of mist and everyone screamed as the entire group was suddenly consumed by a purple cloud of the stuff. It was like the USJ all over again, and May felt the floor disappear from underneath her feet as they were teleported to a room even smaller than the hallway they'd been in before. The villains they'd caught had gotten teleported too, but to Mina's surprise, they were still with the group instead of getting teleported back to the villain's base. A loud voice cut through the panic. "Hello everyone, it's me, Cheat Code, please calm down." Reluctantly, the students stopped pushing at each other and looked toward a speaker embedded in the wall. "All Might is fighting a villain outside, and it's unsafe both for the heroes and the villains to be in the main school right now. You are still at UA, just in a bomb shelter that is highly rated enough to keep you safe. If you have any other questions, please ask Nedzu." Mina looked around in confusion before she realized that Nedzu, Aizawa, and Todoroki, alongside what looked like a detective, who hadn't been with the group before, had been teleported to relative safety alongside them. "Well," Nedzu smiled, "this is an interesting development. What in the world do you think you're doing?" Izuku yelled at the screen. "He beat All Might, you can't fight him." "I have to go help her." Hitoshi paced restlessly. "I have to." He tried to go for the door, but Kurogiri portaled him back to the center of the room. "No, you'll only get yourself killed." Hitoshi turned to him with a glare. "I have to protect her." "Do you have One for All?" May huffed. "No, so sit down and we'll figure out a way to help her without you charging in like an idiot." "What's the support gear he's wearing?" Izuku muttered. "Is it something to strengthen his quirks or just some kind of body armor? Either way, disabling that could be deadly." Shigaraki finished. "It's actually his life support. All Might did a lot of damage in their last fight." Izuku's face lit up. "Even better. We disable his life support and we give Uraraka a fighting chance." "Shigaraki, I need to know everything you know about it. I'm sure you know a little bit about technology, being a gamer and all." Shigaraki grinned. "Yeah, I guess I'm not a complete noob. It's a bit different than a gaming system, but I know enough weak points to point out your targets." "Good. Izuku ran a quick inventory to figure out which of the school defenses were still functional. Let's hear it. Young Uraraka. All Might said desperately. Get away from here. Now. No. Ochako didn't look away from All for One. This is my fight too, All Might. Ah, so the girl actually knows what it means to hold one for all. All for One laughed. Did you tell her, or did she have to figure it out on her own? Ochako ignored a stab of anger at the insult and shifted her stance. What's important is that I'm not going to let you hurt me or anyone else ever again. Even without eyes, the patronizing expression on his face was obvious. Oh my child, that's what all the other holders said as well. Ochako yelled and ran forward. All for One sounded almost bored, air cannon times 5. Ochako barely teleported out of the way in time, slowed down by having to grab All Might and get him out of the way too. Get out of here, I can handle this. No. You can't. All for One walked toward her. You don't stand a. He was cut off as something exploded underneath him and Ochako smiled as she realized that Izuku must be weaponizing the playing field. I think you underestimate me and my friends. You can't follow a trapper. Minetta called out. I know you're there. Spinner dropped from the ceiling and drew his katana. You're the one who killed Stain. No. Minetta lied. The heroes did. A false hero did. Spinner shot back. And I think a traitor like you fits that definition perfectly. You can't argue with it anyway, I know. He told me. Who? Minetta panicked momentarily. All for One wouldn't have betrayed him. He didn't have any reason to. Right? Stain. Spinner tapped his head. That brainwasher destroyed the walls between us and now I can hear him perfectly. You killed him. So what if I did? Minetta huffed and grabbed a ball from his head. Killing him was easy, so do you really think you'll stand a chance against me? Don't be ridiculous. Oh, you're not just fighting me. The building shook and Minetta struggled to keep his footing, but Spinner just used his quirk to stick himself to the floor. He crawled forward like a lizard, unbothered by the shaking floor, and Minetta tried to dodge, but ended up falling to the floor as another violent tremor passed through. Spinner bit Minetta's arm as he passed and then stood up, licking blood from his lips. You're fighting both me and Stain. Minetta felt a shot of fear rip through him as his body went stiff and fell to the floor. He had to get out of this. Sensei would save him. No, no one would save him. For the first time, it was him who was stuck and not his prey. The building stopped shaking and Spinner stalked forward, drawing his katana, and now it's time for you to die. Alright, so what next? Izuku asked. We've done just a generic explosion, which should have done a little damage. Explosions are really only useful if they can clog up his air filters with the smoke. Shigaraki said. He's got a really high HP, but his constitution is low if we can disable his equipment. Alright. Izuku pressed a few buttons. Smoke bombs it is. What else can I disable? That depends. Shigaraki grinned. Do you have access to tasers? All for One was not doing well. He still hadn't managed to land a single hit on that darn girl because she simply kept teleporting out of the way. She'd learned after the first time that she had to put All Might out of his sight, so he had no idea where his nemesis was and there was a severe lack of other hostages to use. He'd tried using the media helicopters, but she had simply gotten them out of the way as well. Or well, the people, considering that the helicopters themselves almost fell on him without anyone driving them. She couldn't match him in physical strength, but in speed and strategy, he would almost be tempted to admit she was superior. He, however, was All for One. It would have been simpler if he could see the other enemy fighting him. He knew it was cheat code. The way the school's remaining defenses were being weaponized against him made that obvious enough, but without knowing where the nuisance was, it was impossible to take them out. His air filters were already giving him issues from all the smoke in the area and All for One was almost certain that cheat code was doing that on purpose. And if he knew about the air filter, that meant that choices were high that Tamura was with him and feeding him information. His path forward was simple then, He simply had to find both his target in one fell sweep. It should be an easy task for the symbol of evil. All Might's successor made another run at him and he readied another attack to push her away, but she disappeared before he could even launch it. In his brief moment of distraction, however, little robotic bugs started climbing up his legs. He went to brush them away when he was hit with a massive shock and all of a sudden, it was much more difficult to breathe. They had fried his life support systems. All right. Time to stop playing around. All for One grunted. Kinetic energy times 10. Did my babies do good, Izuku? May bounced up and down. I gave the spider bots the taser marbles and put them exactly where Dust Boy said. Your babies did amazing, May-chan. Izuku grinned. You can already tell he's looking a little rougher. He was cut off by Kurogiri suddenly snatching him up with a portal and dropping them all with the other students. My apologies, but that room wasn't going to be safe anymore. You did well, cheat code, but you also may have managed to make All for One angry. I'll get your friend and All Might and get them here as well. Izuku nodded. Okay, good luck. It was around the time he disappeared that all of the gathered students finally got over their shock and exploded with questions. What are the villains doing here? Are you working with the League? Your cheat code? Izuku gulped and reached for May's hand. This is why I hide behind a computer. Shota stared at the man who had brought back All Might and Uraraka. The quirk was Kurogiri's, obviously, but the face, that was Shirakumo. When he saw him the first time, he'd been half convinced that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but now, seeing him again, he cannot deny the similarities. How in the world had he ended up with the villains? Shota glanced over at Hazashi, who seemed to be going through the same thought process he was. Shota swallowed. Do you think it's really? Hazashi took a deep breath. Well, there's only one way to find out. He pushed his way across the crowded room and marched straight up to the Shirakumo look-alike, who was currently on the floor playing with the cat that seemed to hang around Shigaraki and Todoroki. Shirakumo, is that you? He looked up and gave them a far too familiar smile. Hazashi, Shota. It's been forever. Yeah. Mike's voice sounded choked. Yeah, it has. Before either of them had time to react, Mike had pulled Oboro to his feet and trapped them both in a big hug. Oboro laughed and hugged them both tighter. I guess I've got some explaining to do, huh? Shatua pulled away and raised an eyebrow. You think? Oboro gave a wet laugh, wiping tears from his eyes. Yeah, I mean, it's still a little fuzzy for me too, but this kid, one of your students, I'm pretty sure, he saved me and helped break the brainwashing I was under and everything that All for One used to control me. Where did he go? Shota looked to see Hitohi standing with Uraraka and staring at them in shock. Do you guys know each other? Oh yeah. I was just talking about you. Oboro grinned. This is the kid who saved me. Shota felt himself tearing up as he put his arm around Hitoshi's shoulder. I guess then, that you've already met our son, Hitoshi. All for One ripped the walls apart. He could tell cheat code had been there. A technology mapping quirk let him know that the camera feeds from the front of the school were still being piped into the giant computer until he destroyed it with a single punch. The ceiling had been disintegrated away, so Shigaraki had been there as well, and they were gone, so Kurogiri had been there too. Though the fact that their teleporter was apparently helping the heroes was inconvenient at best. Oh well, just one more name to add to his extermination list. There was nothing left to find here and neither All Might nor his infuriating successor had shown their faces again, so All for One stalked away, breathing heavily through his mask now that his life support had been made useless by that stupid eclectic attack. He was on a timer to end his fight quickly, which was quite the feat when all of his opponents were cowards. You're not a difficult man to find. All for One turned around slowly, sensing Spinner behind him. Ah, Spinner, it is nice to know that not all of my forces are useless. You see, that's where you're mistaken. Spinner said. I am no longer part of your forces. All for One scowled. Oh really? Yes. Spinner said. My mind has been freed and I finally see clearly. You see, heroes did not kill Stain. All for One felt a hint of annoyance. Oh? I've already disposed of your little traitor. Spinner informed him. Now it's your turn. If All for One still had eyes, he would have rolled them. I just beat All Might, you can't expect to hold a candle against me. You see, that's where you're wrong. Spinner raised his kanatana and ran forward. Things are only impossible if you lack conviction. All for One sighed, ignoring the pain in his lungs as he batted the lizard away with one hand. I don't have time for this, get out of my way. No. Spinner growled, getting to his feet. Your time is up. He ran at All for One again, then again, and each time, All for One butted him away like it was nothing, but I wasn't. His breathing was getting more and more labored. He needed to get back to the doctor, and quickly. As much as he hated it, the best course of action would be to retreat and then dispose of his enemies another day. How amazing. Suddenly his body locked up and he fell to the floor, knocking his head against the concrete on his way down and shattering his mask. That's the thing about conviction, Spinner said, raising his katana above All for One's neck. Much like blood, a little goes a long way. All for One winced as the katana came down. All those plans and he didn't even get to enjoy the outcome. Nebzu looked out over the ruins of Ua and sighed, we are going to have to rebuild this entire school. Perhaps we should make a few changes while we're at it. Chapter 88. Reconstruction. Izuku put the last of his notebooks into his backpack and walked out of his empty room. The service that Ua had hired to help all the students move into the dorms was already there and Mom fretted nervously as they carried Izuku's boxes out of the apartment. Baby, are you sure you want to move into the dorms? I know they said they may as well build them, since they're rebuilding everything else, but it just seems so hard having you so far away. I'll be close to my friends, Izuku said tiredly. And I'll be surrounded by heroes, Mom. I'll be fine. They'd had the same discussion 20 times that week, twice just this morning as he was packing up the last of everything, which only reaffirmed his decision to move out. He'd be closer to his labs and his new computer setup in case of another attack and he'd get to spend more time with May and his friends. It didn't make it any easier to say goodbye when Mom was hugging him with tears in her eyes, though. I'm not going to be gone forever, Izuku insisted. I'll still visit on the weekends and everything. I know. Mom sniffled. But it just feels. Oh, you're going to be so far away. At least you'll be protected and safe with all those heroes. I don't want you getting swept up in any more of those villain attacks, you could have been hurt so badly. Izuku gave her a strained smile. The school had tried telling her about his involvement in the villain attacks, but all she'd heard was that he was the victim, not that he was one of the people trying to prevent the attacks, and it had just made her worry more. It gave Izuku a little more leverage for his argument to move into the dorms, but it still left a bad taste in his mouth. I'd better get going, Izuku said. May's probably already there looking over blueprints, so. Mom frowned. You're going to be living very close to your girlfriend, Izuku. Do we need to talk about? Izuku went bright red and shook his head, no. Sorry, no, it's just, she's way more interested in making her babies than. You know, making babies or anything. Mom sighed in relief, okay. Just so you know, if you ever have questions, I'm here. Okay. Izuku smiled. Well, I'd better get going. Bye. He gave her a final hug and walked out the door. Hitoshi fiddled with the ribbon on the daisies while he waited for Ochako to pick him up. You don't think the flowers are too much? Definitely not, Mike answered quickly. Everyone loves flowers. I'm sure she'll love them. Aizawa added. And the two of you are so awkward already that even if it's the wrong move, she probably won't care. Show. Mike punched him in the arm. You can't just say that. Why not? Aizawa grinned wickedly. It's true. Don't listen to him. Mike huffed, you'll be fine. Their entire apartment was a mess of boxes and half-packed suitcases, and Hitoshi was pretty sure he should have picked literally any other day for their first official date, but he hadn't known that they were going to be instituting brand new dorms when he'd suggested going out for mochi today. Since both of his adults were teachers, they had a brand new apartment on campus that they didn't have to pay rent for, so, as Dad would say, it was only logical to move. It still didn't make today any less stressful or chaotic. I feel like I should be picking her up, Hitoshi said. Isn't the guy supposed to pick the girl up for the first date? For right now, Uraraka still lives 2 hours away, Dad said. And she can teleport. You picking her up would be illogical. Hitoshi groaned. I know you're right, it's just. I want to do this right, you know? Mike smiled and brushed a bit of imaginary dust from Hitoshi's shoulder. That's what the flowers are for. You're gonna do great, son. Hitoshi took a deep breath and let it out. Oh, okay. Aizawa nodded proudly. You've been through like 3 life or death situations with this girl now. A date is gonna be a piece of cake. Ochako appeared right next to him. What's gonna be a piece of cake? Me convincing my husband to eat an actual meal and not just coffee, Mike said quickly. Fat chance. Aizawa shot back. It's got multiple food groups. Therefore, logically, it qualifies as a meal. Mike pouted. There's nothing logical about it. Aizawa just grinned in response. You two stay safe. Call us if there's any villain attacks. And have fun, Mike added. Don't forget that. Ochako smiled. Oh, that'll be easy with Shindig around. She turned to Hitoshi. Are you ready? Definitely. Hitoshi held out the flowers hesitantly. And, these are for you. If you want them. If you don't, they were my adult's idea. Oh, I want them. Ochako turned bright red and took the bouquet. Thank you. I love them. She held out her hand for him to take and then stopped. Oh, actually I forgot. I don't have an anchor at the mochi place. Oops. We might have to walk. Hitoshi smiled and took her hand anyway. It's okay. That just means I get to spend more time with you. Shoto looked at the setup that Shigaraki had planned and shook his head. I can't believe they're letting you have an entire gaming setup in a prison cell. Because Shigaraki's information had been essential to protecting the students during the attack on Ua, Principal Nedzu had taken responsibility for him. His crimes were too great for traditional house arrest, but he'd been given a cell underneath Ua that was basically an extra secure apartment that locked from the outside, and he was allowed to have visitors. Nedzu had even installed a door just big enough for Ippor to fit in, since she decided to follow her kittens to the dorms rather than stay in Murder Alley. Shigaraki had brought all his gaming consoles in. Once Powerloader had checked them over for security reasons, he'd been allowed to create his own setup. Well, it's not like they set me to Tartarus or anything, so that's nice. Shigaraki shrugged. Plus, it's not like I can step out of line. If I remove these stupid gloves or make a move to use my quirk, the room will instantly fill with some sort of sedative gas and I'll be knocked out before I could even hurt the cat. Ippor hissed from her place on his gaming chair, but when she saw Shigaraki didn't mean it, she yawned and went back to sleep. Shoto laughed. Be careful. I think Ippor might get to you before Yue's defenses will. No, but I think she's going to smother me in my sleep, Shigaraki said. How she gets along with the rat principal I have no idea. Are you ready to start the stream? Sure. Shoto shrugged. Is everything already set up? Shigaraki rolled his eyes, like I have anything else to do. Shoto took a seat on the second chair as Shigaraki glared at Ippor. Move, you stupid cat. Just put her on your lap or something, Shoto said. Come on, hurry up. Whatever. Shigaraki scooped up Ippor and dumped her in Shoto's lap. Your cat, your problem. Ippor gave a disgruntled meow, but settled down on the left half of Shoto's lap. He sighed. Fine, but she's going to wear you down eventually, you know that, right? I can pretend. Shigaraki did a final check that everything was working and then started the stream. Hello everyone. Sorry we dropped off the face of the earth, we got arrested. You mean I got arrested, which was your fault by the way. Shoto deadpanned. You turned yourself in, it doesn't count. Yeah? Shigaraki challenged. And who's streaming from a jail cell right now? Shoto smiled, technically both of us. A look at the chat confirmed that everyone, as usual, assumed they were joking. Their fans were going to get a nasty shock if the two of them ever decided to turn on their cameras. May was already at the school, or what there was left of it. They had put first priority on completing the dorms so that the students could move in, but the rest of the school was still a giant mess of construction and wet concrete. About a third of the school had been completely destroyed and 3/4 had been damaged in some way or another. The good thing was that no civilians had been injured during the attack and student injuries had been kept to a minimum and were mostly just from the students getting caught in the gas attack. Most of the villains had been injured in some capacity with the exception of Dabi who had left before the attack was over, but the only deaths had been All for One and Minetta, who had both shown evidence of being killed by Spinner, not the heroes. The days since the attack had been a whirlwind of activity, especially for the support course students who were all helping with the reconstruction. Izuku and Mei had spent most of that time helping to redesign the tunnels and making some manual defenses that didn't rely on electricity as a power source. In other news, they had learned that trebuchets were a lot of fun. The labs weren't complete yet, so Mei had set up a miniature lab in the common room of their dorms and Izuku smiled as he watched her fiddle with the prototypes they'd made yesterday. You look like you're having fun. Is your stuff already moved in? The movers are still bringing it over. Mei said without looking up. You? I'm in the same boat. Izuku said. So, what do you want to work on until then? Mei grinned and pulled out some blueprints. Well, I was thinking of some ways we could make the tunnels a lot more fun. Chapter 89. Heroes. Izuku and Mei were in a construction tent that was currently doubling as Nedzu's office. Do you think Nedzu wants to talk about the tunnels or the trebuchets? Mei asked. Ew. Maybe he has a new project he wants us to work on. I'm not sure. Izuku hummed. Don't get too excited though. He probably just asked us to come so we could talk about logistics. Nedzu's voice rang out behind them. In a way, you are both correct. Izuku and Mei looked to see Nedzu walking into the tent. So, we have a new project? Mei asked hopefully. Of a sort. Nedzu said, taking a seat. I am sure you're aware that the provisional licensing exam for our hero students is mere weeks away. Yeah. Izuku nodded. Do you want us to give everyone another analysis? Or maybe help them train one-on-one in preparation for the exam? No. Nedzu smiled. I would like you to take the exam. The walk to the mochi shop was nice. It was a warm day and even though he didn't have to, Hitoshi held her hand the whole way. Ochako felt like her face was on fire and she really hoped her naturally pink cheeks disguised at least some of the blush but knew that was probably hoping for too much. Finally, Hitohi broke the silence. What do you think of the new dorms? It's kinda weird. Ochako said. I just barely moved back in with my parents and now I'm gonna be moving out again. It's just a lot of moving. Well, you're a teleporter. Hitoshi smiled. You're always going to be Ocha going someplace or another. Ochako shot him a playful glare and he laughed, nudging her slightly and they walked the last block to the mochi shop in comfortable silence. Izuku stared at Nedzu in disbelief. What? We're not heroes, we're support. We don't want to be heroes. What Izuku said. Mei nodded. I'm not abandoning my babies. Nedzu held up his hand in a calming gesture. We're not asking you to. You would still be primarily in support, but what with your prominent involvement in every villain attack we've experienced so far this year, not to mention the increased danger that will come now that your identity as cheat code is more widely known, it only makes sense for you to be able to defend yourselves, both in terms of skill and legality. And, of course, in order to do so most effectively, you would need hero licenses. But we don't want hero licenses. Mei said simply. Licenses mean work and time that I could be using to perfect my babies, so no thank you. It also means using those inventions to help others. Nedzu pointed out. Which you have already proven that you are capable of doing with great effect. The licenses would simply give you more freedom and resources to do what you have already been doing of your own prerogative. But we don't want to be heroes. Izuku stood up. And even if I did want to be a hero, which I don't, I can't. Nedzu tilted his head, and why do you say that? Izuku looked at him incredulously, because I'm quirkless? I thought that was obvious by now. Ah, Nedzu looked at him sadly. I suppose your reaction makes much more sense now, even if I do not agree. Izuku stopped. What? The idea that a quirkless person cannot become a hero is, quite happily, incorrect. Nedzu chirped. Of course, there will be more difficulties, but you excel at overcoming every obstacle in your path, so I have no doubt of your capabilities and there are no laws preventing it, so yes, I believe it is perfectly possible for you to become a hero. Izuku shook his head. Look, I gave up on that dream a long time ago. Be that as it may, Nedzu interrupted, getting licensed is still the best course of action. You may not have had any legal ramifications from your involvement thus far, but if you keep assisting as you have been and performing heroics without a license, that will not always be the case. But we're not performing heroics. Mei argued. We're acting as support, which is what we want to do. That's why we came to Ua in the first place. Yeah. Izuku agreed. What we're doing isn't hero work. You are saving people. Nedzu shrugged. I fail to see the difference. I've never wanted to be a hero. Mei said. It would take my focus away from my babies. It would also give you better opportunities to advertise them. Nedzu smiled. Imagine seeing a hero use their own inventions and trusting their life to them. How much more enticing would those inventions look, both to the public and to other heroes? Much more effective than a traditional commercial, don't you think? Mei bit her lip. Well, when you put it like that. How about I let you think on it? Nedzu suggested. You two can talk it over and tell me your decision by tonight. That way we can properly adjust your schedules for the upcoming semester. I assure you that you will still be primarily students of Class 1F, but you will be joining Class 1A for subjects such as heroics and combat. You would be both support and heroes. Support heroes, if you would. Izuku and Mei shared a look. They had a lot to think about. Hitoshi smiled as he overlooked the large variety of mochi they'd ended up with. You know, this is probably too much mochi for two people. Ochako hummed. That's what a coward would say. What, Shindig? Aren't you up for a challenge? Oh, I'm always up for a challenge. Hitoshi smirked. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to catch a teleporter. Ochako blushed and ducked her head. I guess not. Oh. My adoption papers are going to be coming through soon. Hitoshi said. It's weird timing right when we're having to pack everything up for the dorms. How is that even going to work? Ochako's eyes widened. The dorms, not the adoption, obviously not. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. Congratulations. Hitoshi managed to hold back for a few seconds before bursting into laughter. Well, for the adoption, you see when two men love each other very much. Ochako hit his arm. Oh, stunt up, you realize I can just leave, right? Hitoshi gave her a cocky smile, and yet you're still here. Ochako raised an eyebrow. I don't have to be. Hitoshi smirked. They're giving my adults an apartment on campus so they can hang around and respond if there's any issues in the dorm or whatever. I get a normal dorm like everyone else, but I'll also have a room at the apartment if I want it. It's just kinda up to me. Ochako nodded. It sounds like fun. I'm just glad you're in 1A now. It would be so weird if you had to live in the 1C dorm. I mean, it's gonna be weird enough with Mei and Izuku living in 1F. Let's be honest, Hitoshi rolled his eyes. Those two are going to be living in the tunnels. The rats already practically adopted them, so they may as well just make their home in the maze. Ochako laughed. Yeah, they're probably there now. Izuku paced back and forth in one of the few areas of the school that had been completed. Mei sat on the floor working on her latest project as Izuku paced. You're going to give yourself motion sickness. Izuku slumped down onto the floor with a huff. What gives them the right to tell me I can be a hero now of all times, Mei-chan? I begged to be a hero for 10 years. That's a whole decade and everyone told me no, even my mom. But now that I've given up and found a new goal and am finally in a good place, now all of a sudden, it was possible all along? How does that even make any sense? What gives them the right to suddenly change their minds like that? In his defense, Mei said, Nedzu was never one of the ones who told you that. My old principal did. Izuku argued. And my teachers and Kachan and everybody else. I finally accepted that it was impossible, Mei. I found a new dream and I even held a pity party for goodness sake. I threw a goddamn mental funeral for my old dream. What gives them the right to tell me I can be a hero after I put in all that work to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't? Mei put down her invention and reached for his hand. You're being an idiot. She turned away and started tinkering with her tools again while Izuku stared at her in shock. Excuse me, I thought girlfriends were supposed to be supportive. Not when you're being stupid. Mei said simply. I put a lot of work into inventions that never work out, but does that mean I shouldn't try? No. Even if it blows up in my face, it was still worth the work I put into it because I learned something from it. You're just over there giving into the sunk cost fallacy, so no, I'm not going to agree with you. You're being stupid. Izuku froze. Oh. Mei snorted, yep. It doesn't matter what work you've already put in, you can't change that. What you can change is what you do now. I think Nedzu's right. Being heroes will give us a really great opportunity to market our inventions and give us more resources to do what we've already been doing, but you're my partner, so I'm not doing it without you. Izuku took a deep breath and took Mei's hand before walking into the classroom. Aizawa greeted them with a nod and Hitoshi and Ochako smiled at them while the rest of the class exchanged glances of confusion. Izuku squeezed Mei's hand a little tighter and gave a little wave. Hello everyone. Class, you already know cheat code. Aizawa said. Shinso. Would you like to introduce us to our friends and explain a little bit about why they're here? Yeah. Hitoshi stood up with a grin. Everybody, these are my kidnappers, Izuku Midoriya and Mei Hatsume, and they are going to be heroes.